Hello and welcome to the Columbia Daily Tribune's college basketball webcast. This is sports editor Joe Walljasper along with Tribune basketball beat writer Steve Walentik. Steve, Missouri coming off an 89-61 victory over Georgia at home. They have one more non-conference game against Savannah State, then they open Big 12 play Saturday against Kansas State. As we look kind of back on this non-conference season, Kim English, averaging 16 points a game, has been their leading scorer in several games. He's not the guy necessarily I expected maybe to be the leading scorer on this team. Maybe you did. But what's your sense of him? Has he become like the team leader of this team or the star player of this team, the guy that other teams go into it trying to take away from Missouri?
Well, I think if we, first of all, go back to the tape, we can see that I did say Kim English was going to be the leading scorer.
Don't vote, Steve.
I don't know that when teams prepare for Missouri, they prepare for one guy. The way they play, I don't think you can do that. I do think he's, maybe the first point of emphasis on the offensive end is a guy you got to take away from them. He's a scorer, and he's got a scorer's mentality, and that's sometimes hard to find. He's averaging 16 points right now. He's gotten better as a scorer as the year's gone on. He's gone for 26 times. And if you look at the last 3 times he's done that, he's just been a lot more efficient than he was early on in the season. He scored 20 points at Vanderbilt, too, but he shot 5 for 17 in a loss down there. At that point, I looked at him and saw a guy who was going to take a lot of shots, and therefore he was going to have to score a lot of points just on volume alone. But I think he's become a much more complete player as the non-conference season has gone on. He's been much more efficient, and he's doing more things. He got 6 rebounds against Illinois, which was a career high and was big at kind of limiting Missouri's damage on the glass there. He's shooting 41% from three-point range right now, which is better than he started out the season. I think he still has holes in his game. He's not a great ball handler. He's an improving defender, but he's got work to do there. But I think you look at him and you see potential to be a star player, and I think he would like to be that. He's a charismatic kid, likes to be in front of cameras and interacting with people. I think he kind of relishes being the go-to guy, and I think he's capable of becoming that. I don't think he's there yet, but I think you saw in the Illinois game, he was the guy that was pulling guys aside and keeping people focused, settling them down when Illinois made a run, and I think that's the sort of thing that Mike Anderson would like to see out of a guy who could become his star player.
I guess we kind of assume the leaders of the team would be Tiller and Taylor, but is English more of that guy? Do people listen to him when he talks, or does he?
Well, they did against Illinois. I don't know. It's hard to say. It's still early, and a lot can change. But I think he does have the respect of his teammates at this point, and I still think that there's something to be said for Tiller and Taylor being the veteran guys who were such a huge part of everything that they accomplished last season. But I think Kimmy is definitely joining them in that discussion.
They played a couple of SEC teams. They go down to Vanderbilt and lose and get out-rebounded by 20-some. Against Georgia on Saturday, they out-rebound Georgia, which is a pretty good rebounding team. Do you think, as you look at it now going into Big 12 play, that they are good enough in the front court to hold their own and win games in the Big 12?
Well, I still wonder. The Georgia game was a positive development for them because Georgia, the one thing that they did sort of have coming in was a pretty good front line. And Missouri did do a good job of neutralizing it. It helped that they were able to get Trey Tompkins into some foul trouble. And, he only played 16 minutes in that game. If he's in there, Georgia's a different team, presumably, because he's their leading scorer, best rebounder, all those things. I don't know that you want to base too much on one performance, especially when something like that happens. But there are positive signs coming out of the front court of late. Lawrence Bowers has gone. He's averaged 20 points his last 2 games, and I believe he's 16 for 19 from the field. That's obviously pretty good. Keith Ramsey has really been a steady performer for them all year. He's not a scorer, but he's been their best rebounder. He's been a pretty solid defender in terms of getting steals, blocking shots, and making them a little bit stingier defensive team than they were a year ago in terms of stopping people on the offensive end, not just forcing turnovers. I think that the big key for them as they go into the Big 12 is they got to get a lot more out of Justin Safford. He was a guy that I think you thought was going to be their leading scorer, and he had a foot injury, a bone spur earlier in the year that was bothering him. Mike Anderson has said that he's getting healthier, but then he plays against UMKC last week and he shoots 3 for 11, and that's not a particularly big front line he was facing. They have to get more production out of him because as you look at this team right now, they're really only 3 deep up front. They can't count on very much from Steve Moore.
Okay. Well, they open up with K-State, which I think is, even though it's the first game of the Big 12 season, is just incredibly important because it's at home. They also are going to have to play Kansas and Texas at home, the number 1 and 2 teams in the nation. If you lose to K-State, you're looking at possibly just being 5 and 3 at home, and then you've really got a tough battle to make the NCAA tournament. How do you see the K-State game? How do you think Missouri matches up against them?
Well, over the last couple of years, they haven't matched up well, and they've managed to beat them twice in Columbia, but K-State seems to handle Missouri's pressure better than most people. They give them all kinds of trouble on the offensive glass, and K-State's doing that again. They're really right now they're the best offensive rebounding team in the Big 12. They have a tremendous backcourt, plenty of experience. You wouldn't think that Jacob Pullen and Denny Clemente would really be rattled by Missouri's pressure. They've seen it before. Both those guys can score the ball extremely well. K-State's a little bit better up front than I think they were last year with Curtis Kelly, a transfer from Connecticut, joining the mix, and Jamar Samuels has gotten better. The recruiting class that Frank Martin brought in hasn't been as good as a lot of people expected, but they were getting by because of the experience of their backcourt and those other 2 guys, Kelly and Samuels, as well as a guy like Dominique Sutton is having a pretty solid year for them. I think, one thing that a lot of people did was they underestimated Frank Martin, and I think he's showing this year with this team that he's a pretty good coach.
The other thing with K-State was even that game at Mizzou Arena last year, Clemente got to the basket kind of whenever he wanted. He's so quick. And Missouri, for being kind of a guard-oriented team, a team you think of as super athletic, they had trouble keeping good guards from getting to the basket last year anyway. Yeah, so that'll be an interesting thing of whether they can keep him away from the basket, because if they can't, they could have some real problems.
Absolutely, and he wasn't the only guy, as you said. I mean, Tyreek Evans did that against Memphis. Clemente's a little bit different than Evans in that he's just a quicker guy, probably quicker than anybody Missouri's got. At least it's 2 senior guards. A guy like Mike Dixon or Miguel Paul might be able to have a better chance keeping up with him, but
he's like a whole different level of quick, though.
Yeah, he is.
Some quick hits here. First of all, we didn't get to do the basketball webcast last week, so we didn't get to do our team of the decade then, but let's do it now. Who's your Missouri basketball team of the aughts?
Well, in chronological order, I think you start with Clarence Gilbert, who, the beginning of the decade, I think, was along with Kareem Rush, who's also on the team. Really, those were the face of Quinn Snyder's program, in the best seasons. I think after them, you have the Detroit duo of Ricky Paulding and Arthur Johnson. Johnson was the leading scorer, rebounder, and shot blocker of the decade, and really the best inside presence Missouri's had, going back probably to Doug Smith. I don't know. You could make an argument. And then the last guy, I think, is Damari Carroll, who is certainly the face of Mike Anderson's program to this point, the emotional leader and leading scorer and rebounder from last year's record-setting season. I think those are sort of the obvious 5.
My exact same 5. We can agree. What do you think Missouri has to do to make the tournament in Big 12 play?
I think they have to go 9-7 as a bottom goal. I think 8-8's not going to get it done, especially with what this team has done in the non-conference. They don't have enough impressive wins to this point, and their most impressive win, Illinois, isn't even something that blows anybody away. So 9-7 is a bare minimum.
They could probably go 8-8 if 2 of the 8 were like Texas and Kansas, but
then you have a hard time only going 8-8.
Yeah. Big 12 basketball poll in the preseason. Missouri's 7th. Maybe rearrange it now from what you've seen to what 1 through 12. How would you rank them now?
Start with Kansas, number 1 team in the country. Texas, number 2 team in the country, also the number 2 team in the Big 12. They meet, by the way, in Austin February 8th, which may be the game of the season. I think K-State has moved up to the top 3 with the way they've played. They're number 10 in the RPI right now and have had a really good non-conference season.
Do you think they're good enough to challenge those other two, or are they a step below, clearly?
Well, we're going to find out in January because both Kansas and Texas go to Manhattan this month. I think they have a shot to win one or both of those games in Manhattan. I think their guards are good enough, and that's so important, but I don't know that I would pick them just because those other two teams have so much depth and talent. I think Baylor is number 4 right now, which is a surprise, but they've got, they've won 3 games away from home against BCS schools, Arizona State, South Carolina, and I'm forgetting the other, but they've had a good non-conference season to this point, much better defensively than they've been. Texas Tech's had a good, surprising season to this point. I think they're number 5. A&M is number 6, have played a good schedule and have done well. The problem with them is they've lost Derek Rowland, and that changes things going into Big 12 play. I think Missouri is still number 7. I'm not sure what to make of this team at this point because of the strength of schedule, but they have looked better during their current winning streak. Oklahoma State is number 8, have a good record, but they, like Missouri, haven't really beaten anybody that blows you away. And they're having trouble scoring, which is rare for an up-tempo team. Iowa State's number 9. I think they could still do some damage in the league because Marcus Gilstrap is, maybe the best newcomer in the conference, and Craig Brackens is still Craig Brackens. Could on talent could be the best player in the league.
You think he's one of the? You think Gilstrap
could be the best newcomer? I think he could
not
be.
Freshman.
Not freshman. No, I think Xavier Henry is the best freshman. But I think Nebraska, number 10, still stingy defensively, still can't score. But Oklahoma is the most disappointing team. I have them number 11 right now. They're young, so they could get better. But 5 losses right now is only one shy of what they had all last season. And Colorado in a familiar position, bringing up the rear.
All right. Well, thanks for joining us on the Basketball Webcast. Next week we'll be back talking about that conference opener.